Hi, so welcome to another video. This one is called Build Your Bubble, and essentially we're going to talk about what a supportive bubble might look like, what could be in your supportive bubble, and I guess how it can play a role in your recovery moving forward. And I think it's important that we include this video because as human beings we need connection. We've evolved to be social, and that's true regardless of what we've been through. But especially after you've experienced what you have, we need other people, and they can be a really powerful and transformative part of your recovery moving forward. But I do recognise that when you've experienced something like you have, it can really shake your sense of safety in other people. It can be really difficult and possibly feel almost impossible to trust somebody again. But that's why having a supportive bubble of people around you can have the opposite effect, and it can be a really powerful part of your recovery. And that's why we've included this video, to help, I suppose, break down the layers of building a bubble and hopefully try and give you the resources and confidence that you need in starting to navigate what a supportive bubble might look like. And I think it's also a really important thing to talk about this, because trauma is often thought about, or it's spoken about, as if it's one experience. It's an isolated event that when the traumatic experience is over, so is the trauma. But actually that's not true. Trauma is actually an ongoing experience, and it can be reshaped and re-experienced with every interaction that we have with the world. And what I mean by that is, if we share our experience with people, how people respond to us, and also the messages that we receive from not just those around us, but actually the society that we live in, can actually have a huge impact on us, and it can actually compound the traumatic experience. So if you have a really negative experience when you've shared what's happened to you, it can prolong the trauma, and it can actually be a trauma in itself. So that's why it's so important to build this bubble, not just with the people in your life, but also what other things are having an impact on your recovery. And that's why I'm going to talk about a model. I'm going to introduce a framework which essentially talks about some of the layers of impact that may play a role in your recovery. And it's called the ecosystems theory. And it's essentially a diagram, as you can see on the screen, and it covers different layers of influence that we as individuals interact with on a daily basis. So it includes us, ourselves. It includes our family, friends, where we work, maybe where we go to education, so university, school. It includes contextual factors like politics, services that you access or services that you can't access, for example, and things like the media as well. And then there's also one which is probably one of the biggest, because it trickles down and influences every other system, is the kind of culture that you live in, and the messages that as a society contribute to our beliefs and the ideas that we have. And all of those systems interact with one another, and they play a really big role in your recovery. And that's why I'm hoping it can be helpful to identify some of those layers, so that you can start to recognise what parts of those systems may have a positive influence, and perhaps some of the parts of the systems that maybe have less of a positive influence as well. So it starts with you as an individual, but I'm not going to talk about that too much, or really at all, in this video, because all of our other videos have talked about that in quite a lot of depth. So we've thought about things like how you respond to trauma, how you cope with things, maybe what your triggers are and how you manage them. And that all forms a really important part of what makes you as an individual navigate your recovery. So if you haven't watched those videos, we've put the links below, whether you want to pause this video and watch those first or go back to them once you finish watching this. But it might just be a helpful part of adding some things into your bubble. But the next system is called the micro system. And essentially it's made up of the people and the places that we interact with on a daily basis. So as I've said, things like family, friends, our partners, where we work. But it is important to mention that whether you choose to tell anybody in this system is completely up to you. And how you decide, or whenever you decide to have that conversation, is completely in your control. But we have prepared some things, I guess, that might help you to navigate that conversation. But it is important to know that it is completely on your terms. Some people might prefer to write a letter. Some people might prefer to set a time aside so that they know that you have and your loved one has time and space to have this conversation without any interruptions. But for some of you, it may just come out and it may have just felt right in that moment. And I guess the important thing to recognise is that however it comes out or however you choose to communicate it, if it feels right for you, then it's right. You know, don't place any judgments on how you've decided to have this conversation. You might want to start the conversation by saying something like, I've got something that I really want to share with you, but it's going to be really difficult for me to say, and it might be really difficult for you to hear as well. But you're important to me, and I really want you to know about this, because I want you to be a part of my support system moving forward. And you may also feel it beneficial to set some boundaries to the conversation as well. So you might want to tell them that, actually, I want to share something with you and it's really important, but at this time, I don't know whether I'm going to be able to answer any questions about it. And I know that might be difficult, and I know you might want some information, but right now that's not right for me. You might want to let the person know that all you really need is for them to listen. You don't need them or want them to say anything. You just want them to be there for you. It might be that you're choosing to share it with this person because you'd like them to share it with some other people in your system. You might want them to have that conversation with other people in your life. Or you might want them to not tell anybody at all. But setting some boundaries can help you to feel more in control of the narrative as well. And in that sense, it could be helpful for you to maybe make a note of some of the things that you really want to say, but also maybe some of the things that you'd like to keep to yourself. You don't have to share every aspect of your experience. The things that you share, it's in your control, and that's really important. And I guess it's also important to say that you're sharing this with people who really care about you. And so it's understandable that they may have an emotional response themselves. And this might be quite difficult for you to hold and contain, and it's not your job to do so. And they may also not know how to respond or what to say. And although this isn't your fault, and it's not their fault, it isn't your responsibility to educate them either. We've done that for you. So we've talked about our allies page in some of our other videos, and it's on our website, and it includes resources around how they can support you, but also how to create a space for this conversation and create a really safe environment that this conversation deserves. So you may want to tell them, actually, I've got something that I'd like to share with you, but it would be really helpful for me, and I think helpful for you, if you were to read this information first. And hopefully that might give you both some more confidence in navigating this conversation in a way that feels safe for both of you. But essentially, whatever you feel will be helpful for you during the conversation and after the conversation, it is okay to ask for it. And we've highlighted that on our Allies page so that your loved ones know that as well. And although I want this video to be really hopeful and positive, it is important to acknowledge that these conversations are difficult and they might not go to plan. You may not receive the response that you want. And even though hopefully, your people will be able to access our resources and they will be able to give you the support that you want, it might be a good idea to just have something in place for after the conversation. Because regardless of how it goes, it is going to be emotional. So whether you want to plan, whatever it is that you do to make yourself feel comfortable, relaxed and safe, it might be doing some yoga, it might be spending time with your pet, whatever you do to make yourself feel comforted, maybe just plan to have that sort of in place for after the conversation, just so that you're taking care of yourself throughout this process. So the next system is called the EXO system, which is a funny name, but essentially it includes things like politics, social services and the media. And I think the media is probably the most influential thing to talk about here, and it's certainly one of the things that we can control to a certain degree. And I think we all know that we can be really immersed in social media, and it does have a bad reputation at times for the impact that it can have on our mental health. But it can also be a really useful tool. And I say that because we can control our feed to a certain degree. So we can choose to create a feed that's really empowering and compassionate and educational as well. There are so many dedicated accounts to challenging victim blaming, to empowering people, tips around self-care and how to cope with difficult experiences. And also there's a lot of humour on social media as well. And so we've created a list of accounts and resources that not only we hope will be educational and helpful, but also credible as well, because there is an influx of influencers out there, and we want to make sure that you're accessing those that are well researched and can hopefully have a really powerful part of your recovery. And it's not just social media as well, it's things that you watch on telly, things that you read as well. All of these things, it can be really helpful to consider, what impact are those things having on my recovery, and could I be reading or watching things that might have a different or a better impact. And so we are launching a book club as well. So keep an eye out on the website and our social media for that, because we're going to be sharing monthly books that we hope will be not just an educational part of your recovery, but also hopefully a really interesting and empowering part as well, so we can start a conversation and I suppose interact with each other's bubbles as well. But although I'm saying we can create compassionate and educational social media feeds, we can't completely avoid triggering messages. So it is worth noting that there may be times when you might just need to take a step away from screen time and have a bit of a technology detox. But you know yourself better than anybody, and you'll know when that might be something that's helpful and worth considering. So the last system is called the macro system, and it essentially contains all of the cultural and societal messages that trickle down into all of the other systems and have a really big influence on us and the things that we believe, I guess. And I suppose what's particularly relevant here is things like victim blaming and attitudes towards sexual violence, that although they are myths, there is no truth in any of these things, they do have an impact on us. And we've talked about that in some of our other videos and, you know, the impact that they can have. But I suppose within this video, I want to highlight that we can challenge them. You know, we might not be able to completely eliminate them yet, but actually part of our work at Enough is raising public awareness around sexual violence and, you know, highlighting the truth around sexual violence and the impact that it can have. And you're a part of that. And we also want to help you to develop the skills to ensure that you recognise these messages as being myths and, you know, you don't absorb them and take them on, and they don't influence how you perceive yourself or your experience. And a big part of building your bubble is recognising the messages that you don't want in your bubble, you know, recognising those prejudiced beliefs and separating them from who you are and how you want to navigate your recovery. And like I've said, simply being part of Enough, being part of our community, means that you are taking a stance against sexual violence. And that's not just a powerful thing for your bubble, but it can also be a really powerful part of somebody else's as well. For you to know that you're a part of the change, and that might give somebody else the strength to feel like they can be a part of the change as well. It's also worth mentioning that your bubble can include support services, and we've talked more about that in our Therapy Explained video. But we also have a What Else page on our website, which talks about lots of different options for resources and signposts to further support that can be just as much a part of your bubble as we are, and everything else that we've talked about in this video. But the main thing to remember is that your bubble is yours and it's unique to you. So you can decide who you want in it, what you want in it, and also when you decide to build it. You may have watched this video and you might want to start thinking about some of those layers and, you know, what could be a part of it. But it's also important to take it at a pace that feels right for you, and you will start to navigate what elements in your environment are supportive for you, and you have full control over that. But whatever your bubble looks like, it would be really great to hear from you and to talk about, you know, what's in your bubble, what's been helpful. So it would be great for you to join the conversation around building your bubble on the Enough community, or you might just want to leave a comment below this video. You know, you might want to tell us how you navigated a conversation with a loved one, what helped, and, you know, maybe just sharing some of the resources that you've accessed, whether that's an Instagram account or a book that you've read. And really, you know, I'm hoping that we can, in a way, all become a part of each other's supportive bubble and continue to share the things that are forming a really compassionate and supportive part of your recovery.